Exploring the Cleansing of the Temple, a bold stand by Jesus. Hello and welcome back to the Bible Insights channel. I'm so glad you could join us today. If you're new here, you've landed in the right place. This channel is dedicated to exploring deep biblical insights and unraveling the timeless truths hidden within Scripture. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most dramatic and thought-provoking events recorded in the New Testament: the cleansing of the temple. Have you ever wondered why Jesus would take such a bold stand against the very institution that was supposed to honor God? What drove him to overturn tables and send the merchants scattering? Stay tuned as we unpack this fascinating story, examine its historical and theological context, and discover how it speaks to our lives today. Imagine for a moment the atmosphere in Jerusalem during Passover, a time when the city was bursting at its seams with pilgrims from all over the ancient world. The temple wasn't just a building, it was the beating heart of Jewish life, a sacred space where heaven and earth were thought to intersect. It was meant to be a house of prayer, a quiet haven for communion with God. Yet, as we read in John chapter 2, verses 13-16, the temple had been transformed into something entirely different. Money changers and merchants had taken over the courts, their tables stacked high with animals for sacrifice, and the air heavy with the clamor of commerce. This transformation wasn't a mere change in decor or routine inconvenience. It was a fundamental distortion of what the temple was designed to be, a sanctuary dedicated solely to worship and spiritual connection. When Jesus entered this space and witnessed the commercial activities, his reaction was immediate and fierce. Rather than whispering his disapproval, he acted boldly, overturning tables and expelling those who had corrupted the sacred atmosphere. His actions have puzzled and inspired believers for centuries, and today we're going to peel back the layers to understand exactly why he did it. To truly appreciate the significance of Jesus' actions, we need to dive into the historical and religious context of the time. The temple in Jerusalem was more than just an architectural marvel. It was a symbol of the covenant between God and his people. It was a place where sacrifice and prayer met, intended to be a gateway to divine presence. However, by the time Jesus set foot inside, the temple had strayed far from its original purpose. In Mark chapter 11, verses 15-18, we see Jesus entering the temple with righteous indignation. He was not merely upset about a little disorder. He was confronting a systemic corruption. The merchants and money changers had set up shop in a place meant for quiet reflection and sincere prayer. Their presence was a blatant symbol of how the sanctity of the temple had been compromised for personal gain. Jesus' actions, recorded in passages like Matthew chapter 21, verses 12-13, were revolutionary. They were not just a protest against economic exploitation, but a dramatic reassertion of the temple's true purpose. By overturning the tables, Jesus was sending a clear message. The house of God had become a marketplace, and that was unacceptable. He declared, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." These words resonate deeply because they expose the betrayal of a system that had lost sight of its sacred mission. One of the most powerful dimensions of this event is the restoration of the sanctity of worship. In a time when the temple was inundated with the noise and distractions of commerce, Jesus' actions served as a clarion call to return to the heart of what worship should be. Think about it. When you step into a place of worship, you expect a sense of calm, reverence, and connection to something far greater than yourself. In Luke chapter 19, verses 45-46, Jesus reminds us of this fundamental truth by emphasizing that the temple should be a house of prayer. By overturning the tables, he wasn't just disrupting a marketplace, he was symbolically purging the spiritual decay that had crept into what was supposed to be a sanctuary for all nations. This act of cleansing wasn't simply about physical space. It was a radical call for spiritual renewal. The temple's original purpose was being usurped by greed and corruption, and Jesus was determined to restore it to its intended function. His actions remind us that true worship must be free of the clutter of worldly distractions and commercial interests. In our modern lives, this is an invitation to examine the spaces we hold sacred, whether in our personal hearts or within our communities, and to rid them of anything that detracts from a genuine encounter with the divine. As we consider Jesus' actions, it's essential to understand that his anger was not arbitrary. It was a deliberate and prophetic response to the hypocrisy that had taken root among the religious authorities of the day. The temple, which was supposed to serve as the dwelling place of God's presence, had instead become a theater for exploitation. The money changers and merchants were not just minor irritants. They were symptomatic of a broader issue, a system that allowed and even encouraged the exploitation of the faithful. In a society where religious leaders held immense power, the commercialization of the temple was an insidious way of taking advantage of people's devotion. Jesus' bold action was a direct challenge to this system. By driving out those who had turned worship into a commodity, he was exposing the moral decay that lay beneath the surface. His cleansing of the temple was a call to accountability, a dramatic rejection of the corruption that had infiltrated the spiritual heart of the community. It was a reminder that integrity and sincerity in worship are non-negotiable, and that any system that strays from these principles will eventually be confronted by divine justice. But beyond the public and institutional implications, the cleansing of the temple offers a deeply personal message to each one of us. Consider for a moment the state of your own heart. In the same way that the temple had become cluttered with distractions and commercial interests, our inner lives can become overwhelmed with doubts, habits, and influences that distance us from true spiritual growth. Jesus' dramatic act was not just about setting the temple right. It was about inviting us to reflect on our own lives. Imagine your heart as a sacred sanctuary. What if it became overrun with the noise and chaos of everyday life, leaving no room for quiet prayer or sincere connection with God? Jesus' actions urge us to clear away the clutter. It's a call for personal renewal, a reminder that we must continuously evaluate what we allow into our inner sanctuaries. Are we letting materialism, negative thoughts, or unhealthy relationships erode our ability to connect with the divine? Just as Jesus restored the temple to its rightful purpose, he invites us to do the same with our own lives, to reclaim the spaces that are meant for genuine worship and reflection. Let's take a deeper look at what this event might mean beyond its immediate context. Many scholars and theologians have long debated whether the temple cleansing was a one-time protest or a symbolic act heralding a broader, more transformative message. Some see it as the beginning of a new covenant, a moment when Jesus not only critiqued the corruption of the temple, but also signaled the coming of a spiritual kingdom that would transcend traditional religious boundaries. This interpretation suggests that Jesus was preparing the way for a paradigm shift in how people experienced and related to God. Consider the rich symbolism of the temple itself. For centuries, the temple had been the focal point of Jewish identity and religious practice. Its very walls represented the promise of God's presence among his people. By cleansing the temple, Jesus was symbolically tearing down the old order, a system that had become mired in legalism and corruption, and paving the way for a new way of relating to God, one that emphasized personal faith and heartfelt devotion over ritualistic observance. In this sense, the event serves as a powerful metaphor for the transformation that Jesus offers to each of us. It challenges us to break free from the constraints of outdated practices and to embrace a more authentic living relationship with our Creator. This story isn't just a historical account from nearly 2,000 years ago, it speaks directly to our lives today. Think about the many temples in our modern world. They might not be physical structures, but they are the spaces we dedicate to our passions, our relationships, and our personal growth. In our rush to succeed, accumulate wealth, or simply go through the motions of daily life, we sometimes allow our hearts to become as cluttered and commercialized as the temple had become. Jesus' passionate act of cleansing challenges us to reassess our priorities. It's a call to strip away the superficial and focus on what truly matters. Are we investing our time and energy in things that bring us closer to our spiritual goals, or are we perhaps unwittingly turning our lives into marketplaces where the sacred is compromised by the mundane? This powerful narrative encourages us to reclaim our personal sanctuaries, ensuring that our daily lives remain aligned with our highest values and deepest beliefs. When we look back at early Christian writings and the interpretations of the Church Fathers, we see that the cleansing of the temple was often viewed as a turning point, a symbolic break from the old ways and a bold declaration of the new era that Jesus was ushering in. Early theologians saw this event as a precursor to the dramatic shifts in religious practice that would eventually culminate in the establishment of the New Covenant. They argued that Jesus' actions were not merely about physical purification, but about the spiritual regeneration of humanity. This moment in Scripture is also a reminder of the radical nature of Jesus' mission. He did not shy away from confronting injustice and corruption, even when it meant challenging the powerful structures of his time. His actions serve as a timeless example of how true faith demands courage and integrity. In a world where it is all too easy to compromise, Jesus' bold move reminds us that there are moments when we must take a stand, both in our communities and within ourselves, to ensure that the essence of our worship remains untainted. As we reflect on this powerful narrative, I invite you to consider your own life as a temple. Just as Jesus cleared the physical space of corruption and distraction, he calls us to examine our inner lives and remove any obstacles that hinder our connection with God. This might mean reevaluating our priorities, setting aside time for quiet reflection and prayer, or even making changes in our relationships and habits. It is a call to actively create an environment, both externally and internally, where the divine can dwell freely and fully. Imagine your heart as a sacred sanctuary, a place where you can truly encounter God without the interference of negative influences. Jesus' actions in the temple challenge us to ask ourselves, what is cluttering our spiritual lives? Are there habits or influences that have crept in, clouding our ability to focus on what truly matters? This is an invitation to a process of personal renewal, a chance to start fresh, to remove the distractions, and to recenter our lives around what is eternal and pure. The cleansing of the temple is more than an isolated incident in Scripture. It is a legacy of bold action that continues to inspire and challenge us today. It calls on us to be vigilant guardians of our inner lives and our communal spaces. Whether you are navigating the challenges of modern life or seeking a deeper connection with your faith, this story reminds you that transformation often requires a courageous break with the status quo. Just as Jesus' actions in the temple shattered complacency and ignited a movement for change, so too can our personal acts of renewal pave the way for a more authentic and vibrant spiritual journey. So why did Jesus cleanse the temple? He did it to restore the sacred purpose of a place meant for pure, unadulterated worship, to confront and dismantle the corruption that had infiltrated the very heart of religious life, and to call each one of us to a profound personal and spiritual renewal. His actions were not just a reaction to the misuse of a physical space, but a visionary act that transcends time, a message that speaks directly to the clutter in our lives and invites us to reclaim our inner sanctuaries. If you found this deep dive into the cleansing of the temple as inspiring and thought-provoking as I did, please join our community of truth seekers by hitting that subscribe button. Your support means the world, and it helps us continue to explore these timeless stories and share insights that can transform lives. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What does this event mean to you, and how do you work to cleanse your own temple? Share this video with friends and family who might be searching for a spiritual wake-up call, and don't forget to give it a like if it resonated with you. Remember, every single day is an opportunity for renewal. Let's commit to keeping our hearts uncluttered and our lives aligned with what truly matters. Thanks so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, keep your spirit open, your focus clear, and your faith unwavering.